Hi, my name's Julian Leatherdale. I'm an historical fiction writer, and I'm here today in this magnificent dining room at the beautiful Elizabeth Bay House in Sydney. Why am I here? Well, this magnificent property was the inspiration for the setting of my second historical fiction novel, The Opal Dragonfly. I was very drawn partly to the building, which was for a long time known as the finest house in the colony of New South Wales, but also the story behind the house. Colonial Secretary to Governor Darling Alexander Macleay was the gentleman who built it. He had a land grant of 54 acres right on the bay here at Elizabeth Bay, and he built this extraordinary house at great cost, great expense, partly obviously to impress the hell out of everybody, as you can see from this dining room, but also to house what was the largest collection of insects held by an individual in the world. So the cost of both projects, the insect collection and the house, ended up bankrupting him, and his son bought him out of debt and moved into the house. It's a terrific story, and it's just the sort of background setting for my book. I'm very pleased to be here today thanks to a partnership between Sydney Living Museums and the Sydney Mechanics School of Arts, the SMSA. The SMSA, as you may know, is doing a series of video talks with authors about their work. I don't know if you know, but the SMSA began its life back in 1833 as Sydney's first lending library, and it also held a series of free public talks. It regarded itself as a sort of hub, if you like, of the city's intellectual life. As it happens, the first president of the SMSA was Sir Thomas Mitchell, the Surveyor General of New South Wales, who happens to be an inspiration also for a main character in this novel. So there's some lovely synergies there between my work and the history of the SMSA. I'm very pleased to say the SMSA is still going strong today on Pitt Street. It's a beautiful, peaceful oasis in the CBD that includes the Thomas Keneally Centre, housing a vast collection of books, a personal library of Tom Keneally, who I'm a great fan of, obviously, as I greatly admire his historical fiction work. I'm pleased to say that many years later, the SMA still hosts a great program of free public talks on all manner of subjects, from history to literature to philosophy and health, and I've been honoured to have been invited to give 3 lectures there about the research for my novel. So I strongly urge you to check out what the SMSA has to offer. Now, I've been asked today to talk about my books and also my journey to publication. As someone who had his first novel published in his mid-50s, I guess I'm living proof of the power of persistence. The truth is, I have been writing all my life in one form or another, either professionally or personally. On graduation from a history and theatre studies degree, I became a writer and researcher on a 16-volume military history series with a small Australian publisher, partnered with the publishing giant of Time Life back in the 1980s. In that role, I was given open access to the archives of the Australian War Memorial, and this was a very intoxicating and heady introduction to Australian history, or certainly one important aspect of Australian history. Now, that passion for history grew with my later involvement as a researcher and writer of 2 history documentaries for TV produced by what was then called Film Australia and the ABC. These were The Forgotten Force, which told the story of the post-war occupation of Hiroshima Prefecture in Japan by 36,000 Australian men and women. The second film was called Return to Sindakan, and it told probably one of the worst POW atrocity stories of the Pacific War, as well as the aftermath for a handful of survivors and their families. For me, this was an incredibly powerful experience. It took me into the living rooms of dozens and dozens of Australian men and women who very graciously shared their personal stories of the past. I went on to become a picture researcher at the State Library of New South Wales, immersing myself again in Australian history through maps, artefacts and images. While writing for my day jobs as a policy advisor in state government and later a PR manager at a hotel school, I continued to write for myself and produced several bottom drawer novels for children and adults. And then the penny dropped. I realised I could combine my passion for history and research into my love of writing fiction. This is how Palace of Tears was born, and it was published in Australia and New Zealand by Allen & Unwin in 2015 and HarperCollins Germany in 2016. The novel is a three-generation family saga set around a fictional version of the Hydro Majestic Hotel in the Blue Mountains. It also tells the little-known, shameful story of the internment of thousands of Australian citizens of German descent as enemy aliens during World War I. So I now realised I'd found my calling as a writer of historical fiction. My second novel, The Opal Dragonfly, is set, as I say, in a fictional adaptation of this wonderful house. It tells the story of the rise and fall of an ambitious and well-off family in 1850s Sydney. It was an even steeper learning curve for me than my first book, but I loved every aspect of the research and the writing. So I really wonder what, for me, is the appeal of historical fiction. Well, I recently read a very interesting book by Philip Roth, an alternative history novel called The Plot Against America, in which the pro-Nazi, anti-Semitic celebrity aviator Charles Lindbergh wins the 1940 presidential election instead of FDR winning it. It makes pretty chilling reading today in the age of Donald Trump. And I was struck by this very interesting insight from the main character, and I'd like to read it to you. As Lindbergh's election couldn't have made clearer to me, the unfolding of the unforeseen was everything. Turned wrong way round, the relentless unforeseen was what we children studied as history, harmless history, where everything unexpected in its own time is chronicled on the page as inevitable. The terror of the unforeseen is what the science of history hides, turning a disaster into an epic. So I think one of the things that historical fiction can do is to evoke the immediacy of that terror of the unforeseen, to offer us a vivid, if always approximate, portrayal of history as lived. We today ask the same questions that people of the past did. What does the future hold for me, for my family, for our society, for our humanity? And this, I believe, is how historical fiction can talk powerfully to the present. I've started researching and writing novel number 3, set in King's Cross in the 1930s, a time when Australian writers thought a great deal about the terrors of both the past and the future. In 2018, my writing life has also taken some new unexpected turns. A children's and YA publisher, Christmas Press, has just acquired a children's adventure novel I wrote many years ago, a supernatural detective story set in World War London and Paris. And after some 30 years break, I have returned to writing short novels and plays, just to keep the creative juices flowing between novels. I urge you as writers to embrace the unexpected, to have courage when you write, to take risks, to be bold, to hold nothing back, at least for your first draft. And don't try to think it all out in advance or second guess what will work. Welcome and trust the process of inspiration, the serendipitous, the messy meanderings of your mind. The book you will write is a creation of what is happening right now in your life and inside your head. It isn't some perfect thing that exists outside you that you have to hunt down. I also suggest you should read widely and outside your comfort zone. It is as a reader, finally, that you will make judgments about how your writing is working or not. I also urge you to write with a sense of hope and excitement. This is what will sustain you on the lonely but incredibly rewarding marathon of writing a novel. So, writers of the future, I wish you all the best with that big adventure. Thank you.